Started. My name is Nadia Fiorita, and I am a trained clinical psychotherapist. I've been in the mental health field for about 12 years now, and I have worked in both outpatient and inpatient settings within Fairfield County. I work in private practice now, where I treat both adolescents and adults who come in for various struggles, anxiety, depression, relationship issues, trauma. And I've chosen to be trained in an array of approaches so that I'm able to really personalize and customize treatment for each client that I work with. And first, I just want to thank HAYVN for having me today. When I was preparing this presentation, I really wanted to offer some education and information, as well as some practical tools and concepts that you can really just take with you and begin to use at home. And also, as I was thinking about this presentation, one of my hopes is that this is really a new opportunity to speak openly about mental health. I think the stigma around mental health has been really strong. And while I do believe that we're able to speak more openly about it, which is really great, the stigma and the shame around mental health, I think, still continues. And I think in general, when someone struggles with the mental health issue, let's say anxiety, depression, it tends to be this sort of individual problem, and it could feel very alone. And I think right now, because COVID, the pandemic, the quarantine has really impacted all of us, we can have a sense of what that struggle might feel like, even if we haven't struggled with it before. Okay, so just gonna move along here. So just quickly, I wanted to review the main objectives for the presentation today. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about family burnout, what it is and how this impacts parents specifically. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about effective coping strategies that adults can use to cope with or to prevent that from happening. Next, I'll go into common reactions that children and adolescents have, as well as ways for parents to help them cope effectively and to foster, resilience and emotional strength during this time. I think a lot of times if our child is struggling, we might feel helpless and powerless and we're not sure what to do. So I really wanted to provide some ways that you can help your children during this time. And lastly, I created a resource page that I can share after the presentation. I just did like a one-page Word document that I share websites, books, and mobile applications that I love, so I can email that out to anybody that is interested. Okay, so I think for the most part, we are all under an incredible amount of stress these days, and I think it is safe to say that no one has been spared, any stress or anxiety or intense emotion around the whole situation that we are going through. And this is not just around the virus itself. This is, around the quarantine, the lockdown. There have been devastating consequences having to do with our mental health that are very much worthy of conversation and discussion. And as a therapist, I don't think that these things can be ignored. So from people losing their jobs or, small businesses suffering, now as we reopen schools and we're trying to do this hybrid format, this has really created a new normal for everyone. And even though we don't necessarily have hard data or evidence on the pandemic and its impact on our mental health yet, I think we can safely say that all of us are being impacted and it's very real for everyone. Okay. So what is family burnout? So within the family context, and because I wanted to sort of gear this presentation around mental health within the family, I thought this was a very important concept to talk about. And it's a pretty common thing that families are experiencing right now. And I think we could refer to it as togetherness fatigue, which I think is a pretty accurate term. It is this concept of spending so much time together or too much time together. And I think on the surface, it can seem like a positive thing. It could mean that we're getting closer, we're doing more things together. But with so many other aspects of our lives being taken away or dramatically changed, this can be quite overwhelming and exhausting. So how do we know what this looks like or if we are struggling with it? And first, I just really wanted to talk about the definition of burnout specifically. And this is not necessarily a clinical disorder, but it is something that has come up more recently. It is defined as a persistent state of emotional, physical, and or mental exhaustion caused by an accumulation of high stress. And the result is feeling overwhelmed, drained, and unable to cope. So a few signs of this may include feeling physically or emotionally exhausted. And this can happen because we are juggling too many responsibilities or we have too many tasks or demands on ourselves. And our ordinary tasks, in addition to new responsibilities, can feel more burdensome now. And I think in general, it's taking us much more energy to kind of do the normal things that we're used to doing. And more specifically, parents are feeling this too. And I read it recently like this, and I thought this might ring very true for many of you, that parenting right now is a full-time job with forced overtime. And I think a few things to know or to be aware of if you think you might be going through this is just that you're feeling exhausted, you're feeling drained, maybe you're overwhelmed, and you're having difficulty taking care of daily tasks. And as a parent, maybe you aren't necessarily feeling your best. Maybe you're less happy and less fulfilled than before. Prior to this, you might have felt pretty good about your parenting, but now maybe you feel like you're doing it wrong or you're doing it at a subpar level. And then on top of it, you might feel anxious or guilty or angry that this is impacting you the way it is and your parenting. You also might just be feeling really fed up. And as a parent before, I think you might have felt this. And now I think it just feels like this on steroids. It might just feel really strong and intense. You also might be noticing that you are more easily irritated or annoyed with less minor things or smaller things that maybe wouldn't have annoyed you prior to this. Just a few risk factors that I wanted to highlight that might make you more vulnerable to experiencing this burnout. If you're a single parent or you have very little or no emotional support, you might be vulnerable to this. Also, if you have extremely high standards for yourself as a parent or you tend to be perfectionistic, that might also make you vulnerable. If you handle stress less effectively than others, or you are maybe very empathetic and you are more emotionally sensitive, this also might make you more vulnerable as well. And just to go into a few potential consequences, you may feel a higher level of anxiety or depression with a low mood, or you might notice that you're losing interest in things that you previously enjoyed. You might also be noticing an increase in alcohol use or other unhealthy addictive behaviors, as well as sleep disturbance or disruption. There might be more conflict in your marital relationship or with your partner or spouse. And even on a more severe level, burnout in the family, or if you're experiencing burnout as a parent, can even lead to neglect and abuse towards children. So it's really important to acknowledge this because it really does impact the whole family. You also might be noticing that you might want to like escape or opt out of things that you normally do in a relationship or within the family. Okay, so I thought it would be really helpful to just give you specific strategies that you can use at home. So what can you do as a parent in order to best cope with this or prevent it from happening? So first, it's really important to just acknowledge where you are emotionally. Allow yourself to recognize or admit how much stress you are experiencing and just how difficult this time has been. Just acknowledging this can help us feel a little bit better and provide some relief. It also helps us to be able to really just validate ourselves as well, which can help us regulate our stress and emotion. I wanted to highlight this specifically first because we have to be aware and mindful of what we are experiencing for ourselves. Next is practicing self-compassion. So this has been something that I've actually been using more and more recently, just because everybody's going through such a difficult time. And really what this is really just practicing self-kindness towards ourselves. And I think we tend to be pretty critical or judgmental on ourselves when we're struggling or having a difficult time. So one of the things I would recommend is really just try to respond to yourself in a way that a loved one would respond. If you went to a friend and kind of shared your experience and they were a good friend and they were, you know, in their best self in that moment, they would probably be very gentle and comforting and be really understandable. And I think it's really important to try to apply that to ourselves and also remember the common humanity in the situation right now. We're all going through this. It's been difficult for everybody. And just to remember that we're not alone in our experiences. Also, be very mindful of how you are showing up in your communication with other people. Try to take a step back and be self-aware in how you're expressing your emotions and how you are behaving in your relationships. One really important question to ask might be, how would my best self handle this issue or problem or situation? I think if you're able to create a little bit of distance and not react right away, you can have more control and choice in how you respond. And when we are feeling a lot of stress or we're feeling a lot of emotion, I think we forget that we can actually choose how to respond. Next, I wanted to just talk about how to practice gratitude or the importance of practicing gratitude. I think taking the time to identify and write down the positives that have come out of this situation, or maybe just acknowledging the special moments, the things and people that we appreciate, can really help enhance our mindset in a more positive way and increase overall health. I know this is something that I try to do daily, and if you're able to do it consistently, you can really see the benefits. And you can do this in the morning or at night after your day. And lastly, something that I think is really, really important is just making time for play and relaxation. And this is something that you can do alone or with your spouse or partner, even just as a family all together. It could be a meditation, a date night with your spouse or partner, or planning a fun movie night. And I think right now with school being back in session, we are busier than ever before. So it's really important to schedule it into your week. Literally going into your Google Calendar or writing it down in your planner that this is when you're going to do this, because this is really, really important, and that overall will create a sense of calm and playfulness for yourself and within your family. Okay, so I'm just going to take a sip of water. Okay, so next I'm just going to talk a little bit about the common reactions or responses that we see in children and adolescents. So in general, anxiety is the most common emotional problem that we typically see in children, and it could be a bigger issue even during times of crisis. And sometimes a crisis like the pandemic can be traumatizing for some children. And I think for parents, it's really important to be ready to handle a variety of different expressions or manifestations of anxiety. And really just knowing that this is a natural response to what has overtaken our lives right now. So for school-age children, common behaviors to look for include, and you can follow along on the slide, acting confused or forgetful, maybe somatic complaints or physical complaints like stomach aches or headaches. Maybe they might be acting very hyper or too silly, or they just have a lot of energy, maybe more so than before. Maybe they might be having some tantrums or meltdowns. Maybe they are breaking things and there's more physical aggression. They might also be having lots of worries, whether they express them or not. They also might be having some separation anxiety, or maybe there's more hesitation or reluctance to separate from a parent. They also might be reassurance seeking, And you also might be noticing that they're not necessarily doing well in school, or that they're having a decline in their performance, or maybe they're having less interest in really engaging than before as well. You might also notice a sleep disturbance. Okay. So next, I thought we would just talk a little bit about the impact on adolescents, who tend to recover more quickly, I think, in general, but it's still really important to be mindful of when they might be experiencing anxiety or depression, or just traumatic responses to a disaster. So some of the things that we might notice include intense emotions such as worry, sadness, guilt, anger, or fear. You might notice changes in social behaviors. Maybe they're more withdrawn than before. Maybe they're changing friends more frequently. Just being mindful of how they are showing up in their social lives. They might be staying busy to avoid feelings. Maybe they're always on their phone. I know that's a big thing right now as well. They might be using drugs or alcohol. They might also be losing interest in school or things that they found pleasure in prior. And just something that's really important as well to remember is that typically with teens, or something that you might see in teens, is that they might be more likely to exhibit externalizing behaviors. So they might be more likely to act out. Maybe they're doing risky behaviors, maybe they're swearing or breaking more rules, maybe they're more defiant. And on the other hand, they might also be internalizing. So they might be more withdrawn or wanting to be alone. Maybe they're talking a lot less, or they might seem more quiet. And they're just in general showing less emotion and expression. Okay. So next, I just wanted to, since we're talking about mental health, I really wanted to just highlight this issue of social isolation specifically, which is a major factor in the decline of our mental health, especially these days. And it could really be just considered a crisis in and of itself. And one of the things that we do know and understand about social isolation is that it's connected to both anxiety and depression. And just a statistic that I wanted to share, according to the Journal of American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, it is clear there are strong associations between loneliness and depression, both in the immediate and over the long term. And there is also evidence that the duration of loneliness might be more important than the intensity of loneliness. So as we continue to social distance, as we continue to be in lockdown, and it takes more and more time for us to open up and to get back to normalcy, I think this is something that we really need to be aware of. Just in general, children are being deprived of spending time with their peers, which is of course essential to their development and well-being. And this is at any age. So really just remembering to help them stay socially connected and doing your best to help them be genuinely connected to other people. I think sometimes when we're around people, we still might even feel alone and lonely. So making sure that even when we are around people, that we are still feeling genuinely connected, and that time is of quality. And whether that's in person or virtually, just really trying to kind of maintain that for the children is really important. And if your child has lost interest, if they're withdrawing socially, try to work with them to identify creative ways to re-engage or stay connected to their friends. Okay, so it's not all doom and gloom. There is some good news. There are ways to help your children right now, and these things can really help just foster resilience and help your children to really get through this. Okay, so first, look for major changes in behaviors. So worry less about one-off instances and more about persistent or recurring behaviors. And remember that you know your children best. Try to be aware of what might be going on. And if you need to, jot some things down. Maybe there are things that you're observing that maybe seem concerning to you. I think Right now, with all that we have going on, our memory might seem not as great. So if you do need to take note, I would suggest doing that. And if you are noticing something, remember to listen to your gut and go with your intuition, and try to find a good time to have an open, non-judgmental conversation with them. And when I say that, I think it sort of sounds like, well, how do I do that? How do I have an open or safe or non-judgmental conversation with someone? And one of the things that I really try to encourage is just bringing a sense of curiosity to it and really trying to understand what is going on. If your child is having a temper tantrum, also remember that that behavior is occurring for a reason, and you want to understand what is driving it. And really just try to have a calm and nurturing presence, which can be very difficult during this time. And if they do open up and share about what's going on, try to validate what they are experiencing. Maybe you can say, it makes sense that you're feeling this way, or this is really understandable. Also, it's really, really important to be a role model in how you handle stress and manage emotions. Kids learn so much from their parents, and in times of crisis, children of all ages really need a parent that is stable and is coping in a really healthy way. So don't just talk about it, really work on actually showing up for them and show what it looks like to cope in a healthy and effective way. For example, if you've had a really long day and you've been managing working full time and doing virtual school, and you want to grab a glass of wine or you want to veg out, try to do something a little bit more healthy, like get outside or do some deep breathing, or even take some time to take a walk with your child. Another simple but difficult thing to implement is just helping your kids to helping them to verbalize and label what emotions they are experiencing. Parents really have the ability to help their children self-regulate, which means that they're able to help them understand their emotions better. Kids are really stressed out, and they're having to navigate this new normal. So if you help them to put language to their experience, it could help them actually decrease the level of emotion that they're experiencing, and they'll feel more in control of themselves. If you have younger children, you can use a feelings chart, a chart that has like all the different, facial expressions and helps them to label the actual feeling. If your kid is less vocal, maybe they can express it in a more creative way, like a drawing or writing. But even just showing your child that you're curious about what they're going through will help strengthen the relationship and help you to feel more in tune with your kid. Okay. Just a couple more ways that I'm going to go over. Next is helping them to practice acceptance. So there are so many things that are uncertain and out of our control right now. One of the practices we can try is to find acceptance, and this will help us feel less anxious, less frustrated, less depressed. And these types of emotions tend to happen when we're fighting against the reality of something. And right now, our reality is painful enough. We don't have to actually add rejecting the reality of it, because that can really just increase the pain and suffering that we have. So maybe just trying to talk with your child about one thing that they can find acceptance around right now is really helpful. And maybe it's something having to do with school. That might be a good place to start. Okay. And lastly, in thinking about helping your children to build resilience, I wanted to just highlight one more way that you can help your child cope, and that is helping them to cultivate hope and a sense of purpose. And one way to do this is to really help them connect to their future. I think with all the uncertainty going on right now, it might feel like the future is so unknown and unclear. So helping them to connect to their future, what might they be looking forward to? Are there new opportunities that can be explored? I know specifically with young adults as well. I know I didn't talk about that in the slides, but young adults that are in college or that are leaving college or graduated already, there's so much uncertainty around the future, so this could be really important for them. Another way to help them do that is maybe find a new hobby or build upon a current strength that they have, and how can you cultivate that? or even just having them identify a project that they can feel excited about or passionate about, and how can you help them engage in that project. I think that can help your child to have more of a sense of purpose as well as hope for the future. Okay, so that is all. Thank you so much for having me today. I wanted to thank HAYVN and Felicia again for the resources page. I have that created, so if anyone would like that, I can email it out. And the other thing I wanted to just say lastly was, if you are concerned about yourself or someone in your family, really just seek out professional consultation. That doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be in therapy forever, but you can seek out someone, you know, that is a professional therapist or clinician to just kind of say, hey, this is what's happening. You know, is therapy indicated at this time? This is not a time to wait and see what happens. This is a time to really get support since we are still going through this. And that's it.